Hey everybody, Dr. Angela Casey, board certified dermatologist and mother to 3 lovely daughters, with you here today to discuss some more interesting topics within dermatology. I wanted to first of all give a big thanks to all of you who have subscribed to the channel and written in with comments and suggestions regarding topics that you would like to discuss, and also encourage all of you to share this channel with friends and family members who you think may find it useful and interesting. Today we are going to nerd out, so to speak, and I think any of us within the dermatology world are a little bit nerdy in our own respect, and we love delving into various minutiae and details regarding skin health, the hows and whys of how our skin works. But one of the most important components of our skin, and something that's very integral to day-to-day health and optimal function of our skin, is something called natural moisturizing factor. We're going to really dissect this topic, look carefully at all the components and how they work day to day, and look at some practical applications of how we see this in real world in our skin appearance and skin health every day. So let's jump right in. First of all, what is natural moisturizing factor? So this term was coined by Jacoby and colleagues back in the late 1950s and refers to all the components that help keep our skin hydrated, help our skin bind water, help our skin cells interact optimally with each other and with the environment, and work hand in hand with the other components of our skin to keep it strong, pliable, and flexible. And all of these ingredients are actually packaged up in little tiny parcels within the corneocytes, or skin cells, within the topmost layer of our skin, which is referred to as the stratum corneum. So these ingredients serve a number of essential functions, but one of the most important functions is working as humectant. So the various molecules that comprise that natural moisturizing factor actually help draw water into our skin. We've talked about humectants before in other episodes, but humectants are substances or ingredients that attract to and bind water. So they're really hydrophilic. They draw that water in and help hold it there. And in doing so, they're going to keep that skin really strong, well hydrated, flexible, and pliable. If you think of our skin like a leaf, when a leaf is really well nourished and well hydrated, you can bend it and twist it. It's going to be really strong and very plastic in terms of how it moves. If that leaf becomes dehydrated, it gets dry, brittle, and cracked. And humectants work much the same way in our skin, bringing that water in so that when our skin is optimally hydrated, it's going to be really strong and resilient and flexible. And when things are working optimally, it's going to help facilitate the bonds that are between our skin cells. If you think of our skin almost like a brick and mortar type configuration, with the bricks being the skin cells and the mortar being various ingredients such as fatty acids and ceramides and cholesterol that help bind the skin cells together. When all of that's working optimally, that brick and mortar configuration is going to be really strong. But again, if it's not maintaining that optimal level of hydration within it, it's going to start to break down, and that brick wall is not going to be as strong and effective as it would be otherwise. So natural moisturizing factors are so efficient, and they draw in water, and they love that water so much that they actually then dissolve within the water that they bring in. So if our skin becomes overly hydrated, and I think a good example to think about is when we sit in the bathtub for 45 minutes and our palms and our soles get that kind of wrinkled raisin-like appearance, that's from kind of overabsorption of water into our skin. The corneocytes, or those skin cells, start to shrink down. Our skin holds more water within it, and it gets that wrinkly appearance. So we want everything to be perfectly balanced, to really optimize that hydration, finding that Goldilocks level where there's just enough hydration but not too much. Another important function of natural moisturizing factor is that it helps the skin cells shed efficiently. So our skin is really dynamic. It's growing and evolving and changing every day. We're growing new skin cells, and then they are migrating up to the surface of our skin, where eventually they'll be shed. So they are very much living organisms when they're deeper within our skin. And then when they get to the outermost layer, they die and they're shed. The natural moisturizing factor helps ensure that that shedding process stays in balance with new skin cell growth. And it's really important to maintain that balance. We don't want to have too little shedding of our skin cells, because then we get kind of a dry, flaky appearance to our skin, nor do we want those skin cells to shed too rapidly. We want them to be just perfectly shedding at that perfect rate. I think a good clinical example of less or not enough natural moisturizing factor in our skin is those of us who are prone to eczema or dry skin. We're going to have less natural moisturizing factor compared to someone who has really well hydrated skin. And also natural moisturizing factor decreases as we age. And I think many of us have noticed that. I've certainly noticed it over the past couple of decades. My skin definitely requires more hydration, more moisture than it did when I was in my teens and 20s. I've certainly altered my skincare products accordingly and gravitated towards some more robust and thicker creams as opposed to the light, sometimes oil-free lotions that I used back in my younger years. So certainly just a natural part of our skin maturing, and we're losing a little bit of that natural moisturizing factor as our skin matures or gets a little bit older. So natural moisturizing factor, another important function, it helps absorb ultraviolet light. So it's going to keep skin cells deeper within our skin protected from that ultraviolet light. By no means is this in and of itself totally protective. You still need to wear your sunscreen, but I think it's important to recognize that it does play an important role in keeping your skin protected from the sun. So what makes up natural moisturizing factor? A number of ingredients. One of those is urocanic acid, which helps absorb that ultraviolet light. Filaggrin, which is a histidine-rich protein. And the filaggrin actually, it sits within the granules that are in what's called the stratum granulosum. So that's the layer of your skin that's not quite in that stratum corneum, so not quite to the top, but pretty near the surface. And the filaggrin filaments are really important for allowing the skin cells to optimally interact with one another. And that means that those skin cells kind of stretch and flatten out, and then they just lay right on top of each other. So forming that nice, again, kind of brick wall, if you want to think of that analogy, like a brick wall with that mortar in between, which are all those ingredients in between that help keep those skin cells nice and adhered to each other. And we want that barrier and that brick wall, so to speak, to really be really strong. We want it to be adequately hydrated. We want it to be flexible. We want it to be resilient. We want it to shield our skin from surroundings. So filaggrin converts to natural moisturizing factor as our skin cells move up through the stratum corneum. And the timing of this occurring is really interesting. So it's dependent on our external environment. So if we live somewhere where there's relatively adequate humidity, that transformation of the filaggrin into natural moisturizing factors is going to occur more towards the surface of our skin. However, if we live somewhere where it's a drier, more arid climate, that conversion is going to occur at a deeper layer within our skin, which is just so fascinating. Our skin has adapted this protective mechanism to make sure it's adequately hydrated. So it's like your skin automatically knows its relative environment and responds accordingly with when that conversion occurs, which is really amazing. That water activity has to be in that perfect Goldilocks level for this to occur. And the skin cells have to strengthen and as they migrate up towards the surface of the skin. So they're maintaining this really optimal osmotic pressure, meaning the hydration levels within the skin cells is matching that of the environment. And it's also interacting with all the fats or lipids that are binding the skin cells together. So free fatty acids, ceramides, and cholesterol, they're in between the skin cells. So A couple other components, natural moisturizing factors, the skin cells themselves, so that's also referred to as keratin, and carbonic acid as well. So how do we put more natural moisturizing factor back into our skin? Well, one easy solution is to add back those active ingredients. So urea is one that we mentioned earlier. Urea is a humectant, again, so a substance that draws water in, and those levels decrease as we age. So when we have a lotion or a cream that contains urea within it, that humectant, the urea, is going to help draw and hold water within our skin. Lactic acid is another very commonly found and good example, I think widely recognized humectant that's going to bind to that water and keep our skin adequately hydrated. So really any sort of humectant containing product, and then also products that help strengthen the skin barrier, so-called barrier creams, and we've talked about those in other episodes. So the stratum corneum. This is a really interesting concept because it's essentially dead skin cells, but it's still a really dynamic and active and very specific environment, which again is just so fascinating to me. So although those skin cells are dead, they're still forming this really important function and contain factors that are so essential to allowing our skin to maintain its strength and integrity, and how they interact with each other, again, forming that shield or that barrier all the way across the surface of our skin. Just a fascinating concept. There are lots of enzymes that are present within the stratum corneum, and those enzymes require hydration to work optimally. So I kind of think of it as this like really fluid, like almost as if you were like underwater and everything's like migrating as it should, and things are just kind of floating around, and there's interaction and discussion back and forth between various molecules and various cells. That's what's happening within the surface of our skin. It's really, really fascinating. Those enzymes are important though to help break up the bonds between the skin cells, getting back to that idea of shedding of our skin cells so that skin cells can shed effectively. So I hope you've enjoyed this really scientific, kind of extra detailed lesson as to how moisturizing factors, natural moisturizing factors work within your skin, and understanding the relevance of that in your day-to-day skin health, skin strength. Really a fascinating topic. I hope you found it as interesting as I do. And again, please remember to subscribe and write in with any topics that you would like discussed in future episodes. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Have a great one.